He didn't even say it himself. He sent his wife to do it, and we had buried my daughter that same morning. My name is Howard Greer. I'm 63 years old, retired construction foreman, widower. I spent 35 years building other people's homes with my hands. I know what it takes to make something solid, something that lasts. I thought I knew my son the same way. I was wrong about that. Philip was 36, worked as a financial advisor at a firm downtown. Sharp dresser, good talker, the kind of man who always had an answer ready before you finished asking the question. Growing up, he was the one who wanted to argue every decision at the dinner table. Not mean about it, just always needed to win. I used to think that was ambition. I see it differently now. Adele was 34, 2 years younger than her brother. She was nothing like him. She was quiet and careful and thought about people before she thought about herself. She ran a freelance graphic design business out of the spare bedroom and was better at it than she ever gave herself credit for. She called me every Sunday morning without fail, just to check in, just to talk. After Beverly passed, those Sunday calls were the thing I looked forward to most. Beverly, my wife of 31 years, early onset dementia, the doctors called it. She was only 59 when the symptoms started. I sold our house in Columbus to pay for her care and never once regretted it. When she was gone, it was Adele who called me within the hour. It was Adele who drove to the facility and sat with me in the parking lot while I just stared at the steering wheel. It was Adele who said, 2 weeks later, Dad, come stay with us, not as a guest, as family. Philip agreed. At least he said he did. I moved in 3 years ago. I told myself I wasn't going to be a burden. So I wasn't. I contributed $75,000 to the down payment on the house, formalized with a written ownership agreement that Adele insisted on drawing up with a notary. Dad, this protects you, she said. This is an investment, not charity. I built the entire garage workshop from the foundation up, materials and labor that would have cost anyone else close to $40,000. And in 2021, when Philip lost his position at the firm and money got tight, I quietly covered the mortgage for 18 months, $1,800 a month, $32,400 total. I kept every bank record, every transfer confirmation, every receipt going back 3 years, not because I expected trouble, just because that's how I was raised. You keep your paperwork. Adele died on a Tuesday. A drunk driver ran a red light on her way home from a client meeting. She was 34 years old. The next 23 days were a blur of phone calls and arrangements and casseroles left on the porch by neighbors I barely knew. Philip handled most of the logistics, which I was grateful for at the time. He seemed steady, focused. I told myself that was how some people grieve, by staying busy, by doing. The funeral was on a Saturday. Gray October sky, not cold enough for coats, but cold enough that you noticed. The minister said Adele had a gift for making people feel seen. That was exactly right. That was exactly her. We got back to the house around 2 in the afternoon. I changed out of my suit and started going through a box of Adele's things in her old bedroom, the room she had used as a studio before they converted the basement. The room still smelled faintly of her lavender hand lotion. That's when Shirley appeared in the doorway. Shirley was Philip's wife, had been for 4 years. We got along fine, the way you get along fine with someone you see at holidays. She was organized and direct and not particularly warm, but I had never had a real problem with her. Until that moment. Howard, she said, keeping her voice low and careful. Philip and I have been talking. We think it's time you started making plans for your own place. We can give you 60 days. That should be more than enough time to find something suitable. I set down the item I was holding, one of Adele's old sketchbooks, and looked at Shirley. We buried Adele this morning, I said. We know this is hard timing. She didn't flinch, but this is our house now. With Adele gone, it just doesn't make sense for you to stay long term. We want to make this transition as smooth as possible for everyone. I noticed she said our house, not Philip's house. Ours, I filed that away. I looked past her into the hallway. Philip was not there. He had sent his wife to deliver the message so he wouldn't have to look me in the eye on the day we put his sister in the ground. 60 days, I said again. That's right. I nodded once and turned back to the box. She seemed relieved. She left without another word. I heard her heels on the hardwood going back toward the kitchen. Then the sound of Philip's voice, low and quick, and then silence. I stood in that room for a while. I looked at Adele's sketchbooks, her drafting pencils still lined up on the shelf the way she always kept them. I thought about what Shirley had just said and what it meant and what it told me about decisions that had already been made before the casket was even lowered. Then I pulled out my phone and called my old friend Clifford Hale. Clifford and I had worked together at the same construction company for nearly 20 years before he retired and bought a small trucking operation that he eventually sold for enough to be comfortable. He was the kind of man who asked no questions when you needed help and only asked one question now. You got a place to stay? Comfort Inn on Broad Street for now, I said. I'll figure out something more permanent next week. I'll be there in an hour. 3 hours later, I was loading the last of my boxes into his cargo van. Philip came out onto the front porch. He was still wearing his dress shirt from the funeral, sleeves rolled up. He looked genuinely surprised, which told me he had expected me to just sit quietly in that bedroom and wait out my 60 days like a good old man with nowhere to go. Dad, he came down the porch steps. You don't have to do this tonight. I said 60 days. I know what you said. This is come on, come inside. We can talk about this. I climbed into the passenger seat of Clifford's van. Dad, seriously, you don't have to leave right now. Good evening, Philip. Clifford pulled away from the curb. I did not look back. The Comfort Inn room was small and clean and smelled like carpet cleaner. I sat on the edge of the bed with Adele's graduation photo in my hands. The one where she is squinting into the afternoon sun and laughing at something I said right before I took the shot. I don't even remember what I said. I just remember that she laughed. I had taken that photo. I had been there for every important moment of her life. Her first day of high school when she was so nervous she forgot her backpack. Her college move-in day when she cried in the parking lot and pretended she wasn't. The morning she signed the lease on her first studio apartment and called me from the sidewalk outside. Voice shaking with excitement, I had been there for all of it. And now she was gone. On the nightstand was a stack of mail I had grabbed on the way out, 3 weeks of envelopes I hadn't had the energy to open. I flipped through them slowly. Bills, a card from an old neighbor, a catalog, a form about Beverly's survivor benefits. Near the bottom of the pile was a padded envelope, no return address, just my name in Adele's handwriting. The looping, careful cursive she had used since middle school. I stared at it for a long time. I don't know exactly how long I sat there holding it before I finally opened it. Inside was a USB drive, small and gray, and a single folded piece of paper. Her handwriting again. Dad, just in case. Everything you need is on here. I love you. That was all. I set the note down on the bedside table and looked at the USB drive in my palm. I didn't have a laptop with me. I had grabbed clothes, tools, documents, the graduation photo. No laptop. I set the drive carefully in the inside pocket of my jacket and turned off the light and lay there in the dark for a long time before I finally slept. Sunday morning I was up before 6. I drove back to the house. Philip's car was gone from the driveway. He played golf at the country club every Sunday morning, same tee time for years, rain or shine. Grief, apparently, had not changed his schedule. I still had my key. He hadn't thought to ask for it back. I let myself in through the side door and went straight to Adele's home office, the small room off the kitchen where she had run her design business. Everything was exactly as she had left it. Her drafting tablet on the desk, her client folders in the wire rack on the wall, her color-coded filing system that I had always teased her about. She had laughed and said, Dad, someday that system is going to save somebody. She was right. It saved me. The folder marked House Documents Important was in the second drawer, right where I expected it. Inside, the mortgage papers, the deed, the home inspection report from when they bought the place, and clipped to the purchase agreement was the document Adele had insisted on drawing up with a notary 3 years ago. My name, her name, the property address, $75,000. A formal co-ownership agreement witnessed and signed. I photographed every page with my phone, then returned the folder to exactly where I found it. On my way back through the kitchen, I noticed Philip's laptop sitting open on the counter. Screen was locked. And there, stuck to the edge of the keyboard, was a yellow post-it note with a password written in blue ink. 8 characters, capital letter, 2 numbers at the end. Philip had never been careful about that kind of thing. He was the person who used the same password for everything and wrote it on a sticky note and called other people careless. I stood there for a moment. Then I sat down and typed in the password. The screen came to life on his email inbox. I scrolled carefully, not opening anything, just reading subject lines and preview text. I was looking for anything related to the estate, the house, the probate process. I found it quickly, an email thread between Philip and Shirley dated 4 days after Adele's accident. Shirley, so the house is fully yours now. Philip, technically yes. Adele's name was on the deed too, but as her brother and the surviving co-owner I should inherit her share through probate. The lawyer says it's straightforward as long as we move quickly. There's some paperwork, but nothing complicated. Shirley, what about Howard Philip? He's been staying here. As far as the lawyer knows, he doesn't have any ownership stake. Just give me a couple weeks to sort things out. Can't put him out immediately. Bad optics. I took photos of the full thread. I kept scrolling. There was another email, this one sent 3 weeks before Adele's accident. Philip to someone named Carolyn Hollis. Can't wait for Friday. She has a client call that runs late, so we'll have the place to ourselves until at least 10. Bring that wine you mentioned. My hands did not shake. I have spent 35 years measuring twice and cutting once. I have learned to stay level when something important is in front of me. I took the photo and kept scrolling. Then I found the one that changed the weight of everything. An email from Philip to Adele's insurance company dated 11 days after her death. A beneficiary change request. My name removed. Shirley's name added. 11 days. She had not even been gone 2 weeks. I closed the laptop carefully and left everything exactly as I found it. I walked out the side door, locked it behind me, and sat in my truck in the driveway for a few minutes. Then I reached into the glove box where I had put a business card I found under Adele's desk calendar on the way out the night before. Arthur Finley, estate and probate attorney. I called the number. Finley Law Office. The voice was professional, unhurried. My name is Howard Greer, I said. I believe your firm is currently handling the estate of my daughter, Adele Greer. I'm calling because I'm a partial owner of the property at the center of that estate, and I have documentation to prove it. I'd like to speak with Mr. Finley as soon as possible. There was a pause. Mr. Greer, the voice said, let me check his calendar. Can you come in tomorrow morning? I can bring your documents. I drove back to the Comfort Inn. I spread everything across the bed. The ownership agreement photos, the email screenshots, the insurance beneficiary change. Then I took out the laptop I had borrowed from Clifford the night before and plugged in Adele's USB drive. She had copied everything. The original co-ownership agreement, a record of my $75,000 contribution with the wire transfer confirmation. A detailed log of my 18 monthly mortgage payments, $1,800 each, from March 2021 through August 2022, with dates and amounts. A contractor valuation for the garage workshop, putting the labor and materials at $41,500, and at the bottom of the folder, one last document. A page in her own handwriting dated 2 months before she died. Dad has contributed the following to this property. She had listed everything, every dollar, every hour, every repair. At the bottom she had written, he built this house as much as anyone in it. Make sure he is protected. I sat in that hotel room and read it 3 times. Then I closed the laptop and got ready for the morning. Arthur Finley was younger than I expected, maybe 42, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and a desk covered in organized stacks of paper. His office smelled like coffee and old books. He stood up when I walked in and shook my hand like he meant it. Mr. Greer, thank you for coming in. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. I have to be straightforward with you. When your son hired me to handle this estate, something felt off. He was pushing to close things out very quickly before a full asset inventory had been completed. He was particularly focused on establishing sole ownership of the house. I flagged it internally but didn't have a specific reason to push back. Until now, I laid the printed documents on his desk. The co-ownership agreement, the wire transfer confirmation for $75,000, the 18 months of mortgage payment records, $1,800 a month, March 2021 through August 2022, the contractor valuation for the garage. Adele's handwritten summary, dated 2 months before she died. Finley picked up each page and read it carefully. He didn't rush. When he finished, he set them down in a neat stack and folded his hands on top. Your son told me you were a long-term houseguest, he said. He specifically stated there were no other ownership interests in the property. That is not accurate. No, it is not. He leaned back in his chair. Mr. Greer, I need to withdraw from representing Philip. What I'm looking at here is a direct conflict of interest. But more than that, if he knowingly withheld this information when he filed the initial probate documents, we are looking at a misrepresentation to the court. That is serious. There's more, I said. I showed him the email screenshots on my phone, the thread between Philip and Shirley 4 days after Adele's accident. His response to Shirley's question about my ownership, as far as the lawyer knows, he doesn't have any ownership stake. Finley read it twice. His jaw tightened slightly. Then I showed him the insurance beneficiary change. Philip's request, 11 days after Adele's death, removing my name and adding Shirley's. Finley set the phone down on the desk and was quiet for a moment. How did you access these emails? He asked. His laptop was open on the kitchen counter. He had the password written on a post-it note on the keyboard. I still had a key to the house. Finley nodded slowly. That creates some complications regarding how the emails were obtained. But the documents themselves, the emails and the insurance request, speak directly to his state of mind and his intent. The insurance change in particular is significant, depending on how that policy was structured. Modifying it 11 days after the policyholder's death without probate court authorization may constitute an improper transfer of estate assets. He picked up a pen and wrote something on a notepad. Here's what I recommend, he said. I'd like to represent you in this matter. First thing Monday morning, I'll file a motion to freeze the estate and challenge Philip's claims of sole ownership. The co-ownership agreement alone is enough to halt the probate process until this is properly resolved. The rest, he tapped the phone screen, adds significant weight to the picture of intent. I want to ask you something, I said. Philip doesn't know I've spoken to you. He thinks I'm just a grieving old man who left quietly and checked into a hotel. Finley looked at me over his reading glasses. I want to keep it that way, I said. For now, he understood immediately. You want him to keep operating as if he has already won. People make mistakes when they think no one is watching. Finley allowed himself a small nod. I'll file Monday. I won't reach out to Philip until after the motion is served. At that point he'll know, but by then the estate will be frozen and he won't be able to move any assets. He paused. Mr. Greer, I want to be clear about something. This is going to get uncomfortable. Philip is your son. There will be a court hearing. Things will be said in front of a judge. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the post-it note on the keyboard. I thought about Shirley's voice in that hallway, careful and rehearsed. I thought about the email Philip sent to Carolyn Hollis while Adele was working late at her desk to pay the mortgage he stopped covering. I thought about the 11 days. I'm prepared. I said, Monday morning the motion was filed at 9 a.m. By noon. My phone was ringing. Philip's name on the screen. I let it ring twice before I picked up. Dad. His voice was tight, controlled, the voice he used in arguments when he was working hard to sound calm. What is this? My lawyer just called me. You filed a motion. You're challenging the estate. I am. You're claiming you own part of the house. You've been living there as a guest for 3 years. I've been living there as a co-owner for 3 years, Philip. I have the paperwork your sister drew up with a notary. I have the wire transfer for $75,000. I have 18 months of mortgage records from when you couldn't cover the payments. Silence. I kept everything, I said. I always do. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted. The controlled calm was gone. You need to drop this. You have no idea what you're doing. You're going to drag this out for months and spend everything you have on legal fees and end up with nothing. That may be, I said, but I don't think so. Dad, I'm serious. You're making a mistake. Drop it now and we can work something out. We had something worked out, Philip. Your sister made sure of that. You just forgot to mention it to your lawyer. He called me an old man who didn't understand how any of this worked. He said things I won't repeat. I let him finish. Then I said, I'll see you at the hearing, and ended the call. Over the next 2 weeks, Philip called 4 more times. Each call was logged. Each call was angrier and less careful than the last. His attorney sent 2 letters that Arthur told me were aggressive in tone and thin on legal substance. Philip also sent 3 text messages, one of which included a specific threat about contesting my access to Beverly's remaining estate assets. Arthur filed each one as an exhibit. The hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks after the motion. I spent those 6 weeks in the Comfort Inn, then in a short-term rental Clifford helped me find on the east side of Columbus. I reorganized my finances, met with Arthur 3 more times, and taught myself to use the project management software Adele had recommended to me the previous Christmas, the one I had never gotten around to learning while she was alive. I thought about her every day. I still do. The probate hearing was on a Thursday morning in November. The sky outside the courthouse was the same flat gray it had been the day we buried Adele. I wore the same suit. I don't know why. It just felt right. Arthur met me in the lobby at 8:30. He had a leather portfolio under his arm and the focused, unhurried manner of someone who had done this many times and knew exactly where he stood. How are you doing? He asked. Ready, I said. And I was. Not in an angry way, just ready. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor and found the courtroom. Philip was already there with his attorney, a woman named Patricia Doyle, who billed at rates Arthur had described as aggressive. She was sharp-dressed and composed and spoke to her client in short, quiet sentences. Philip was in a dark suit, hair combed. He looked like himself. He looked like my son. For a moment, standing in that doorway, I felt the full weight of what we were doing here, a father and a son in a courtroom, 6 weeks after burying the person who had loved both of us without condition. Then I thought about the post-it note on the keyboard. I thought about the email dated 11 days after Adele's death. I walked to my seat. Shirley sat in the gallery behind Philip. She looked at the floor when I came in. Judge Norma Hale entered at 9:02. She was in her early 60s, silver-haired, with the kind of measured authority that comes from decades of watching people try to get away with things in her courtroom. She reviewed the case file for several minutes without speaking. Then she looked up. Mr. Morrison, she was addressing Philip's attorney. Can you explain to this court why the initial probate filing made no mention of the co-ownership agreement between the deceased and her father, Howard Greer? Patricia Doyle rose. Your Honor, my client was not aware that such a document existed. It was not included in the primary estate files provided to him, and he had no reason to believe the document, Judge Hale said, was in a folder labeled House Documents Important. In the deceased's home office, in the same room where your client has been living for the past 6 weeks. She looked at Philip directly. Are you telling this court that you never reviewed your late sister's important documents before filing for sole ownership of the property? Philip's attorney started to respond. Judge Hale held up one hand. I'd like to hear from your client. Philip cleared his throat. It was an oversight, Your Honor. I was grieving. I wasn't thinking clearly about every piece of paper in the house. I see, Judge Hale made a note. And yet you were thinking clearly enough within 4 days of your sister's death to contact an estate attorney and begin the probate process. You were thinking clearly enough to inform your father on the day of the funeral that he had 60 days to vacate the premises. She paused. And you were thinking clearly enough, 11 days after your sister's death, to submit a beneficiary change request on her life insurance policy, removing your father's name and replacing it with your wife's. The courtroom was very quiet. Patricia Doyle objected on relevance grounds. Judge Hale overruled her without looking up from the file. Mr. Greer, the judge turned to me. Your co-ownership agreement has been reviewed by this court. The notarized document, the wire transfer confirmation, and the 18 months of mortgage payment records you provided are consistent and credible. The contractor valuation of the garage workshop has also been entered into the record. She looked at both sides. Is there any dispute from the opposing party regarding the authenticity of these documents? Patricia Doyle conferred quietly with Philip for a moment. No dispute as to authenticity, Your Honor. Then the co-ownership interest is established. Judge Hale set down the file and looked at Philip with an expression I can only describe as the look of a person who has seen this exact situation before and has no patience left for it. Mr. Greer, what you have attempted to do in this matter is as follows. You failed to disclose a legitimate co-ownership stake to the probate court. You characterized your father as a house guest with no property rights while he held a notarized co-ownership agreement. You moved to evict him from the property on the day of your sister's funeral, and you attempted to redirect life insurance proceeds that were not solely yours to redirect. Whether any of these actions rise to the level of fraud will be a matter for further review. What is not in question is that this court will not allow them to stand. She turned to me. Mr. Greer, your ownership stake in the property is recognized in full. The beneficiary change on the life insurance policy is hereby voided pending a full review of estate assets. You are entitled to remain in the residence for as long as you choose, or until the property is sold and proceeds divided according to documented ownership stakes. Any attempt to interfere with that right will be treated as contempt. She looked back at Philip. Additionally, given the misrepresentation made to this court in the initial filing, I'm referring this matter to the Ohio State Bar for review of the probate process and to the Ohio Division of Securities regarding your professional conduct as a licensed financial advisor. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Philip said. His voice was barely audible. Legal fees incurred by Mr. Howard Greer in this matter are to be covered by the estate. Miss Doyle, I expect a full amended asset inventory on my desk within 10 business days. She closed the file. I sat there for a moment after she left the bench. Arthur put a hand briefly on my shoulder. Around us, the courtroom began to move again, papers shuffling, voices starting back up. Philip and Patricia Doyle were in close conversation at their table. Shirley had her hand pressed flat against her mouth. I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired in a way that went deeper than sleep could fix, and underneath the tired something quieter. Something that felt, strangely, like Adele. Like she was somewhere nearby, nodding slowly the way she used to when something finally came out right. I gathered my folder, straightened my jacket, and walked out of the courtroom. I did not move back into the house. I thought about it for exactly 1 day and then decided against it. Walking past Adele's empty office every morning, seeing her drafting tablet still on the desk, her color-coded folders still in the wire rack on the wall. I couldn't do it. Some things you know about yourself before you test them. Arthur helped me negotiate a buyout instead. Philip agreed faster than I expected. I think by that point he just wanted it over. The number we settled on was $115,000, which covered my original $75,000 contribution, the documented value of the garage workshop, and a fair percentage of the property appreciation over 3 years. I signed over my ownership stake and walked out of Arthur's office with a check and no intention of looking back. The legal fees came entirely out of the estate, as Judge Hale had ordered. That was not nothing. Patricia Doyle did not come cheap. 3 months after the hearing, I heard through Clifford that Philip had listed the house. It sold in 3 weeks. He and Carolyn Hollis moved into an apartment in the short north. Shirley was gone before the sale closed. I don't know the details, and I didn't ask. The Ohio Division of Securities opened a formal review of Philip's conduct as a licensed financial advisor. I don't know how that resolved. That was no longer my business. What I knew was that it happened, and that it happened because he made a series of choices that he thought would go unnoticed by a grieving old man with nowhere to go. He was wrong on every count. I put a down payment on a small condo on the east side of Columbus, not far from the neighborhood where Beverly and I had lived for most of our marriage. Same grocery store, same hardware store on the corner, same route I used to walk on Saturday mornings when the weather was right. It felt like returning to something rather than starting over, which was exactly what I needed. I set aside $30,000 in a trust in Adele's name. The trust is designated for her niece, Clifford's granddaughter, Sophie, who is 8 years old and already showing the kind of focused, careful attention to detail that reminded me of Adela at that age. Adela had adored Sophie. She would have wanted her to have something real, something that lasted. The rest I kept. Living expenses, a new set of woodworking tools, and a Tuesday evening carpentry class I started teaching at the community center 3 blocks from the condo. 12 students so far, mostly men around my age who just want something solid to build with their hands. We meet at 6, work until 9, and usually stand around for another half hour talking about nothing in particular. It is one of the better parts of my week. I keep Adele's graduation photo on the mantle in the condo, the one where she is squinting into the sun and laughing. Some mornings I look at it and tell her how things are going. I tell her the condo is small, but it is mine. I tell her the carpentry class has a waiting list now. I tell her I found the project management software she recommended and I actually use it, which would have made her laugh. I tell her I'm okay, and I mean it. She made sure of that. She drew up those ownership documents 3 years before she needed them. She copied every financial record onto a USB drive and mailed it to me without telling me why. She wrote out that handwritten summary 2 months before a drunk driver ran a red light on a Tuesday evening. She thought of everything because she knew I wouldn't. Not because I was careless, but because I trusted her and I trusted Philip and I trusted that family meant what I had always believed it meant. She knew better and she protected me anyway. Here's what I want to say to you, because I think some of you listening to this already know exactly what I'm talking about. Quiet is not the same as weak. If someone looks at you and sees an old man with nowhere to go, too tired and too sad to push back, they are not seeing you. They are seeing what they need you to be so they can do what they already decided to do. Don't help them. Keep your paperwork. Keep your records. Know what you own and who helped you build it. And when someone tries to erase your worth on the worst day of your life, don't argue with them. Don't beg. Just get in the van, drive to the hotel, and let them believe they've already won. They'll find out otherwise soon enough. And when they do, you won't need to say a word. The documents will speak for you, just like Adele's did.